Shabbat Shalom, my friends. Wow, what a week it has been. And the results, not yet clear. And they probably won't be clear until December, when the runoff election for the senatorial candidates takes place in Georgia. The lead up to the elections offered a variety of nightmare scenarios. But today, the Republic is still standing. The streets are not running with blood, and the stage is being set in Washington for what we have to look forward to for the next 2 years. Permit me an audible sigh of relief. You may join me. Wow. Last week we mentioned briefly both the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin and also the anniversary of Kristallnacht. This week, as history seeks its own cruel balance, we note the date of the assassination in Manhattan of Rabbi Meir Kahane in 1990. In each of the three cases, Rabin, Kristallnacht, Kahane, there were strong, horrific repercussions. For Kahane, we need to note that devoted followers of his radical, racist, and violent dreams are getting ready now to become fully admitted into the new government of Israel. We might yet be forced to witness new shredding of the Jewish people's unity. So much for a sigh of relief. Stay tuned. Okay, our Sedra, get back to it, thank God, is VaYeira, Genesis 22:1, and following. Each of you knows almost every element of the stories contained within this narrative-rich Sedra. What were they? Abraham's hospitality to 3 visitors leads to our patriarch's effort to intervene with God over God's intention to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. We know that story. The origin stories of 2 of our people's most threatening enemies, Moab and Ammon, are also here. These origin stories that give both nations, I must say, incredibly, extremely unsavory beginnings. So much for enemies. The pettiness of Sarah is here, that leads to a dreadful rupture between the descendants of Abraham's sons, Isaac and Ishmael. And the Akedah is there, the binding of Isaac, during which Abraham has forever earned either extraordinary praise or relentless condemnation. We also see in this Sedra the interplay of themes that on the one side are deeply personal or dramatically universal. Abraham is perfectly willing to send Sarah into another man's bed so as to save his own precious life, personal. Abraham is perfectly willing to kill his firstborn son so as to maintain shalom bayit, domestic tranquility, in his tent with Sarah. Personal. Abraham is perfectly willing to sacrifice his other son if that's what God wants him to do. Personal. And at the end, Abraham does not seem to find it necessary to discuss life and death decisions with Sarah. Foolishly personal. Now, Abraham looks at Sodom and Gomorrah and sees that things there, it's not merely a hotbed of sin and corruption, but Sodom and Gomorrah are also the homes of human beings who, like himself, were created in God's image, universal. The text wants us to understand that the descendants of Ishmael will become a great nation. Greatness will never be reserved just for the Hebrews, Israelites, or Jews. Universal. Abraham will wordlessly submit to God on some matters and rise up to challenge God on other matters, universal. God will never be exempt from the yardstick of justice. It is no mere rhetorical question as to whether the judge of the cosmos must be expected to act in a just fashion, universal. Being willing to face the possibility of being killed by God in defense of moral justice, universal. It is not as easy as it sounds to proclaim that each of us as individuals and all of us as a community must act with both personal virtue and universal concern. Personal virtue, universal concern. Our Sedra wants us to see, to feel, to know that the personal and the universal are always going to be in tension with each other. When I took my first course in undergraduate school on economics, I was introduced to the guns and butter conundrum. Do you remember that? Guns and butter? Simply put, guns and butter refers to the political push and pull that goes into determining the allocation of limited resources. I even think I understand that. At a national level, it can refer to how to prioritize the funding of the latest supersonic jet fighter during a time of rising international tension and the demand to make a serious dent in the nightmare problem of homelessness. Times of war or the rising threat of war threaten the worldwide concerns of a major world power. In that sense, universal. But homelessness, as a metastasizing open sore, eats away at the very moral fiber of a community. And in that sense, my friends, it is intensely personal. Elon Musk, Twitter, Elon Musk wants to terraform Mars. He wants to create a living environment for humans on the red planet. That's much of what his SpaceX project is all about. What he doesn't want to do is to pour some of his billions into breaking the barriers our planet confronts and dealing with hunger, desperately broken healthcare systems, and wholly inadequate education systems. Since it's his money, he can do whatever he wants. But feel the tension between dealing with the personal, in this case, making our planet survivable, and the universal, rocketing off to a place, do you know how far away it is? 54.5 million miles away. So that in God-like fashion, Musk can create a new cosmos. That's universal on the largest imaginable sky. But let's go micro. Painful story. One of the most closely watched trials in New York in the 1980s was that of a slum landlord who had simply no concern. I say zero concern, to be precise, for the well-being of his tenants. Now, the landlord was a deeply religious man, a pillar of his synagogue, a synagogue which, by the way, he served at times as the chazan, as the cantor. His presence during the trial, wearing his kippah, gave us rabbis material for endless sermons. His personal concern, the active pursuit of a traditionally observant religious life, had absolutely no connection in his world with the universal need to act with reasonable compassion toward others who are less fortunate and dependent upon him. Now, Abraham was whipsawed between the demands of the personal and the demands of the universal. Personal survival and challenging God. Keeping peace at home and preparing the world for a theological revolution. Caring for each of his sons while yielding to the power of God. We today, now, this moment, we can't escape that tension. Not now. Not ever. The desperately personal and the profoundly universal. We can't escape the tension, but at least, my friends, we can be aware enough, woke enough, aware enough to learn to recognize it. All that needs to be done for the collective will never be achieved, never completed. All that needs to be done to strengthen and to enrich our own lives will never be completed. Almost every yes that we make in our lives requires many different no's. Wide-ranging statements of no might make a few yeses possible. The personal cannot properly be viewed as simply selfish. Wrong way to look at it. The universal cannot be simply looked at as pie in the sky. The struggle between the two, the personal and the universal, is at the core of what it means to be a human being. And I strongly believe the core of what it means to live as a Jew, the personal and the universal. So have a wonderful Shabbat. See you next week, by which time I can only hope that most of the votes will already have been counted. Shabbat Shalom. Have a great week.